It's time for another WrestlePlanet news update, as it seems that AEW have split up the Acclaimed. AEW is said to be signing another former WWE Champion, and Triple H is being blamed for NXT'S failings. All that and more coming up in today's video, but first, the ratings are in for this week's Monday Night Raw and AEW Dynamite, so let's take a look at how things compared to last week. Raw was down slightly in the overall viewership, dropping 2% from 1.821 to 1.79 million. This is Raw's lowest audience overall since the return of fans to the crowd. In the key demo, Raw drew a 0.49, which represents roughly 629,000 viewers in between the ages of 18 to 49. With this being down 4.26% from last week. Now let's look at AEW Dynamite, which dropped significantly compared to last week. In the overall viewership, Dynamite dropped 11.2% compared to last week, going from 1.102 million to 979,000. This ends AEW's 4-week run breaking the 1 million mark. The key demo was down even more, dropping 24%, going from a 0.46 to a 0.35. This represents roughly 454,000 viewers from the 18 to 49 key demographic, down from last week's 593,000. This is 139,000 less people in that demo who seem to be busy doing other things. This is the first Dynamite for a while which wasn't billed as a special following Road Rager, 2 nights of Fyter Fest, Fight for the Fallen and Homecoming, with 4 of the 5 drawing over 1 million viewers. Next up, sadly, we have to report that a wrestling legend has passed away after the Cauliflower Alley Club revealed on Twitter that Dominic DeNucci is no longer with us. DeNucci is a former WWF International Tag Team Champion, teaming with Bruno Sammartino after achieving success in Australia. He is perhaps best known for his part in the Bravo Brothers tag team as the kayfabe brother of Dino Bravo. DeNucci was known as an expert trainer, having a hand in the development of Hulk Hogan and Billy Graham, before opening his own wrestling school where he trained legends such as Mick Foley and Shane Douglas. He died at the age of 89, so he had a good innings, although no official cause of death has been confirmed. We send our thoughts out to his family, friends and fans. Olympic gold medalist Gable Steveson has made headlines recently after becoming the first American heavyweight to win gold at the Olympics since 1992. Since then, he has been weighing up his options, with him said to have offers in professional wrestling and MMA to consider. Bellator MMA and AEW star Jake Hager recently called out the Olympian on Twitter, seemingly challenging him to an amateur wrestling match. Hager said, "I bet $20,000 that Gable Steveson could not take me down. Any takers?" Gable quickly responded by saying, "If you want to lose 20k in 5 seconds, let's go." With Hager following up by tweeting, "Well, someone has to pay the taxes for your gold. Would you like Houston, Chicago, or New York? These are all locations of upcoming AEW shows." Gable once again responded, "Never heard of you, but DM for my address." Steveson is no doubt going to have many options going forward, with not only WWE and UFC as possible destinations, but AEW and Bellator are bound to be interested too. Although the two powerhouses of their respective industries will have something to say about that. I think a career in MMA could be the most likely at this point while he's at his peak of his amateur wrestling skills, perhaps getting in a couple of fights in smaller promotions to test the waters before being signed by the UFC. This week, AEW President Tony Khan appeared on Busted Open Radio to discuss multiple topics, including tonight's premiere of Rampage. It was recently announced that Excalibur, Chris Jericho, Mark Henry and Taz will all sit at the announce desk to call the action. In the interview, Khan clarified the commentary situation, with many feeling that a 4-man booth might be overkill. Tony revealed that it will be a rotating desk, with Mark Henry being assigned to multiple roles across the broadcast. Khan said, "Well, it's going to be a 4-man booth for part of the show, but it's not exactly. It's not always going to be a 4-man booth. We're going to have 4 hosts to the show, but because of Busted Open, Mark is in a really unique position. I think he's a great host, a great interviewer. He's going to stay on his toes because I think he'll be out there with the guys and calling some of the action. But also we'll call Mark into duty and he'll do interviews, some sit downs, and we'll get different perspectives from Mark, so he'll be all over the place during the show. And we'll get a lot of FaceTime and hear from him a lot." Tony also noted that Chris Jericho will drop out of the booth to wrestle when required and said, "There will be times where I think it will be a 3-man booth. There might be other times where Jericho would be wrestling and Mark would be in the booth. And I think there will be times it will be a 3-man booth and times that it will be a 4-man booth. But we really have 4 hosts to the show, is how I'd say it." Whilst I do prefer a 2-man booth, Henry and Jericho working with the more experienced Taz and Excalibur as support should help them get more experience on commentary without being relied on too heavily. This past Wednesday saw the taping for this Monday's episode of AEW Dark Elevation, and the show may have revealed the future of the Acclaimed tag team. One half of the duo, Anthony Bowens, worked a singles match against Pac, with his partner Max Caster nowhere to be seen. Bowens entered with a brand new theme song, which could suggest that he's set for a singles run. His partner Max Caster hasn't been seen on AEW TV since his entrance rap sparked outrage from a portion of the AEW fanbase as well as AEW management after he mentioned multiple sensitive subjects. The team was set to wrestle on this week's episode of AEW Dark, but the match was pulled, and the Acclaimed were also removed from the AEW tag team rankings, having been ranked 2nd the week before. Caster has also removed all mention of AEW and the Acclaimed from his Twitter bio and was publicly criticized by AEW president Tony Khan. It has also been announced that Bowens, without Caster, will be appearing on an upcoming episode of the AEW Unrestricted podcast, where there's a possibility that the controversy will be addressed. It has been reported that Caster has been suspended by AEW for 2 months, although this hasn't been verified by a reliable source as of yet. His future in the company seems very much up in the air right now. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. Next up, it seems AEW could be set to sign another former WWE Champion, with Ric Flair said to be signing for All Elite Wrestling, and it's said to be a lock. This story is courtesy of Wrestling Observer. Flair has been a free agent since his WWE release on August 3rd, and will be available to sign elsewhere from November 1st and onwards. That's assuming that his non-compete clause is 90 days. There is no word on what his role will be, but there's every chance that he could be a manager, perhaps joining fellow Four Horseman Tully Blanchard as an associate of the Pinnacle. He could even just be an ambassador for AEW, using his global fame to help promote the AEW brand. And would you like to see Ric Flair join AEW? And if so, how would you use him? Let me know in the comments down below. Next up, we have another report from this week's Wrestling Observer newsletter, which discusses potential heat behind the scenes aimed at Triple H, who runs the NXT brand. It has been said that it was Vince McMahon, Bruce Pritchard, and John Laurinaitis who were the ones who decided upon the recent NXT releases, and Triple H and his right-hand man Shawn Michaels had no say in the decisions and weren't even aware that they were happening until talent started receiving the calls. It's largely expected that Nick Khan will take over the business side and Triple H will take over the wrestling side if Vince were to step down from power, and there are people in the company trying to undermine Hunter and those that support him in fear that they will lose their position when he does eventually take over. Although previously considered untouchable, Triple H is being held responsible for NXT's failure to stop the rise of All Elite Wrestling during the Wednesday Night Wars, which has given his detractors ammunition against him. Part of this was the product's failure to draw a younger audience, who instead chose to watch AEW on TNT, leaving NXT with the oldest skewing audience among the major national wrestling shows. Many feel Hunter stocked NXT with too many wrestlers who had no main roster potential, instead being filled with quote 5'8" guys who were past 30. One person noted the mindset is that when WWE would sign independent talent, they would first have to beat the independent out of them when it came to work style, but then when it came to the main roster, they had to beat the NXT out of them. This toxicity led to NXT champion Karrion Kross losing on Raw twice, whilst being booked as unstoppable on NXT, before number one contender for the NXT Women's title Dakota Kai lost on main event to Aliyah. It looks like the situation backstage is not looking good for NXT, with locker room morale said to be at an all-time low. The heat towards Triple H has been described as a power grab by those that consider him a rival. And before you go, why not check out my video where I discuss 5 ways that AEW could book the debut of CM Punk.